Okay, so today I'm going to show you how to crochet the edge of a burp cloth. So we have our little edge here. This is a scalloped edge, and then we have a few other edges. This one, we have this edge here. I feel like this is hard to see without a nice little background to see it on. And then this is an even tinier scalloped edge here. So I'm going to show you all of those options and maybe one or two more. But I'll start from the beginning, show you just how to get started, kind of our materials. So here is our little burp cloth. Here I have used a hem stitch needle, and I can't remember the size. I think it's like 116 or something like that. But that doesn't really matter because I already gave you one of these. So, but yeah, I've stitched little holes all around the edge of these, and you're gonna put your crochets through these little holes, and that's what will make our nice little border here. So this little piece is the border, and then we'll do a decorative stitch around the border. So, and then we have, this is some size 10 crochet thread. And then we have a US size 1.6 crochet hook. And you'll notice that in your kit is a 1.25 crochet hook. This was the closest size I could find. They're almost exact. I ordered a bunch of different ones because when I ordered the 1.6 size off Amazon, I was surprised to find that they were much larger than they should have been. And so I kind of had to play around and see what size was going to work. But if you're buying them in person, that is why you see a difference. And be cautious buying any of these online just because the sizes are not always uniform. Yeah, so this is my 1.6 and this is the 1.25 from Amazon. But I could not find a bulk pack of the brand I like. I usually get Susan Bates. And they sell them in packs that are a bunch of different sizes, and I wanted everybody to have this same exact size because this is what fits through the holes. So, okay, so to start, I am going to zoom in a little bit for you guys. So, to start here, we are going to take our string and kind of make just a little loop. And I'm going to hold this loop here behind, and I'm going to take my first little stitch and I'm going to poke through, put my hook through that loop, and then pull that loop through the hole to the front. Then you'll see I have kind of this very long tail. You can shorten the tail a little if you like, but make sure you leave plenty because we are going to stitch over this tail and make sure it gets tucked away. So you've got your loop in the front now, and you're going to hold the part that's connected to your yarn ball, your crochet ball. You're gonna hold this between your first two fingers, and then I use this hand to also grab my cloth. And I'll just hook that string. I'm kind of using this finger here to hold this string. If this technique is hard for you, that's okay. I don't expect it to be natural, and you can do whatever you need to do to make it work. Everybody will kind of have their own technique to it. This is my technique, the way I learned a long time ago, and it will take practice. It won't feel natural initially. So, sorry, I should have been explaining that step as I did it. So I'm going to loop this, and I'm gonna pull it through this stitch. So now I have a nice little stitch, and this is knotted onto there. And then I'm going to poke through the next hole, and I'm gonna make sure that this extra string is above this hook here. So that extra string will be above that hook, and then as I continue to hold this string here, I will loop and pull it through, and then we are going to loop again and pull this through too. So our initial stitch was different than our subsequent stitches. So that initial stitch was kind of to just tie it onto this fabric here and to not have your string slipping and sliding away from you. And then now your subsequent stitches will be what we call a single crochet through these holes. So poke through the hole, loop and pull that string through, and then loop and pull it through two of those loops. And this will make some nice little stitches along your border, and you're going to continue to do that pattern. And you're going to want to make sure that you're not doing these too loose or too tight. Also a note, you can see that if I've been keeping this string where it should be, that string is now tucked under these stitches, so that will help tie it off. So you don't have to tie a knot. It's not very nice to have a knot in your crochet project, and you can usually feel it. And so it's nice to be able to weave in all your ends and make it really secure that way. So we're gonna keep weaving that through. And then, so say you accidentally let this string fly. It kind of goes where it wants to. I'll do a couple stitches of this string going wherever it wants to. And also the lovely thing about crochet is if you hate part of what you're crocheting, you can just pull this string and it will come right out. Just like that. And you can kind of put your loops back on and use them again if you mess up and let your hook slip out on accident. So yeah, doing a few of these stitches without that back string. And then I flip it over and I'm like, oh shoot, I did forget to tuck my back string here. This is how you will weave your end in. So you can put your crochet hook through these little loops on the back, you loop this around and you pull it through, and you'll keep doing that. So whichever way is easier for you. I like to continually tuck it as I crochet, but not everybody loves it that way. So I will show you now what it looks like when you do your stitches too tight. And so this is going to be if you're keeping tons of tension in your crochet string and you feel like you can hardly move your hook, you can hardly pull your string through, you're probably keeping too much tension. And I'll show you what this starts to look like. I'll do a few stitches like this. And it really just pulls on your fabric. It makes it not lay nicely, and your finished product will never relax really. It'll just always have those little wrinkles in it. Now, everybody's first project is bound to have one or two stitches like this. That's really common, but if you know about it, I feel like it's easier to avoid. So you can notice here, this piece here, it is like really tight, and you can kind of see that it's like bending and warping. So your entire, if you do your stitching too tight, your entire edge will be warping and kind of squished like this. And it also makes it really hard to crochet the next row. If you start to notice your stitches looking like this, I want you to just pull them out. I know it's painful. The number of stitches you pull out is is going to be painful, but it's better for your long-term project and also your learning. You can learn to recognize, hey, that stitch is too tight and I need to redo it. And it's just always better to redo it because there's no going back once you've once you've stitched the whole project, unless you want to just cut the whole thing out. That would be really frustrating. So I like to go back a few stitches, or maybe 20 stitches, rather than going back, you know, and starting over on the whole project. So now I'll show you what it looks like if your stitches are too loose. Too loose of stitches is not as big an issue, but it does get it looking sloppy. So rather than being too tight and having your fabric all scrunch, you'll just have it start looking sloppy. So if you'll notice, I'm really letting these loops get far from this border, this edge, and I'm just letting them be very loose. This is not what we want. So your whole project, the edge, rather than a defined, nice, cute little border, it might look a little bit extra puffy. It might look a little extra messy. Obviously, everybody is going to have their own mistakes that they make as they're learning to crochet, so don't feel bad if this happens to you. It's certainly easy enough to do. So this, honestly, like, you can tell that looks a lot better than a way too tight stitch, right? And honestly, these are, maybe I didn't go loose enough with showing you my bad example, because they don't really look too bad. They're looking somewhat nice, but it will get really messy as you get onto your next row, and if your next row is also quite loose. But part of the problem is, you can see here, like, these strings will be just a little looser, and I feel like they're more prone to snagging, especially even in a delicate wash, or just with wear and tear usage, they'll just be a lot more prone to snags. So I do like to keep it a little bit tighter than that. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about our basic stitching, I'm going to, you'll continue that one basic stitch. It's called a single crochet all around the edge, and then I'll show you how to tie it off here. So we're doing our single crochets. Here we are getting to the next hole, has a stitch in it already, so I don't want to use that hole for another stitch. I am just going to take my hook and go through this first loop on the next row up. So rather than the holes here, these are your next holes. This is the next row of holes that you're going to use here and here and here and so on. So I'm going to put my my hook through that hole. I'm going to loop this string and I'm going to pull it through. And rather than looping again and pulling through like our single crochet, I'm just going to continue pulling this loop through that stitch as well, and that's called a slip stitch. So I'll do that one more time just so it's a little bit easier to see. So sorry, here's our single crochet, the last one of our first row, and then we're going to put it through this whole loop and pull it all the way through so it slips through those and kind of makes a little knot, and it doesn't go up. So and when we talk about going up, we're talking about up to the second row. So now I'll show you how we're going to go up. So we've kind of tied off our first row a little bit, and we're going to make a couple of chain stitches. So we're going to loop and pull through and loop and pull through. Those are a couple chain stitches for our next row, and then we will go to the next empty stitch. So this stitch here, that stitch has my chain stitch coming up through it. So we're not going to use that one. We're going to go to the next one, and we're going to do a double crochet. So you'll start with your hands you're still holding this string always between these two fingers, and you're going to grab that little loop. You're going to poke it through this next stitch, and then you're going to loop that so that you can pull it through that stitch. Now you're going to have 3 loops on your string, and then you will grab a loop and pull it through 1 and 2 of those stitches, but not the 3rd stitch. So now you'll have 2 loops on this, and then you're going to grab a loop and pull it through both of those stitches. So now we have this nice tall stitch that's going to give us a cute border. This is typically what I use for a boy border. There's a lot of ways you can vary this. You can do 2 of these in 1 stitch and then skip a stitch. So I'll show you that option. So you loop, stick it through that same stitch you went through, pull, get another loop, pull through 2, get another loop, and pull through 2. And so that's 2 of those are in 1 hole. And then you are just going to do a chain stitch. So you're going to loop and pull it through that stitch, and then you'll skip 1 stitch here at the bottom and go to your next one, and you're going to do the same thing. So pulling through 2, pulling through 2, and then you'll do the same. So this gives you kind of a little, you have kind of a stitch and a gap and a stitch and a gap, where if you want to, another option is to have, I'm going to skip a stitch one more time, and then I'll show you another option for this border. So we have our first stitch we've made, and rather than making a second stitch in this hole, we're just going to keep going and do 1 of these stitches in every single hole. And then this gives you a sort of more consistent border. It doesn't have the larger stitch and a gap. It's just got kind of a little consistent border here along the edge. So those are some options for boy stitches, and then I will show you some girl stitch options too. Also, obviously these can be done in whatever way you would like. I just kind of have my boy stitches be a little less frilly, and my girl stitches tend to be a little more frilly and look like scallops or something else. So for my girl stitches, I'm just going to bring us down to this main level. This isn't something you will do, but this is just for my example. So we're just going to pretend that this is the start of our row. We're at the, sorry, the camera went out of focus for a second. This is the start of our row here. And for our girl stitch, I'm going to just do a second little slip stitch. So I'm going to poke through, grab a loop, pull it through to the front, and then pull it through my loop there as well. And so I have a couple little stitches here, and then I'm going to do this same double crochet stitch is what it's called. It's a double crochet. So I did 1 of those, and then I'm going to keep doing those, and I'm going to do them 5 times. So I have, that's 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I'm going to, on the next stitch, do a slip stitch. So this stitch is where you poke it through the stitch and you pull it through to the front, and then you use that same stitch, so pulled it through to the front. Now you use that same stitch to pull through your original stitch. And this brings you back down to this kind of right to the border level. And this is gonna create some really nice scallops. So you'll do 2 chain stitches through the next 2 stitches, and then you'll do your 5 double crochets again. And this is how you do a scalloped border for a more frilly look on the edge of your burp cloth. And I have a finished burp cloth with this edge, so I can show you kind of what that looks like once it's all the way around. Let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, so I'll do one more stitch in that, and then you'll get a picture of what a scalloped stitch looks like here. So did our 2 little slip stitches, and there you have what will become a scalloped border, and you can kind of see how those scallops start working. So I realized I forgot to show you guys how to do a mini scallop. So if this was like kind of your starting row, you would just go and do 3 double crochets into the next stitch. So there's 1, there's 2, and there's a 3rd. And then you're just gonna do a slip stitch through the next hole. And then rather than doing 2 slip stitches, you'll just do that 1, and then you'll go to the next stitch and do 3 double crochets again. And 1 more slip stitch. Okay, so these are not the most defined scallops I've ever seen, but you can kind of get the gist. There. So those are your mini scallops. Rather than the 5 double crochets, you do the 3 double crochets, and in between you just do 1 slip stitch rather than 2. Another good option, so I'm just gonna go up and chain 2 as though we're starting a new row, just like we did with the boy stitches I showed you first. And we're going to, in the next stitch, we're gonna do, you can do either 3 of these double crochets and then skip 1 stitch in between each, or you can do 5 and skip 2 stitches. Both look really cute. So I'll show you the 3 first. So I've got 3 stitches here, and then I'm gonna skip 1 bottom stitch, and then I'm just gonna do the same exact double crochet stitch 3 times in, not the next stitch, but the next. So I skipped 1, and then I'm gonna do 3 here. And so we kind of have this a little bit more of a almost seashell shape on that border. So you have this scalloped edge you can use. You have this more seashell looking border. And then I'll give you the example for 5. So if I skip 2 stitches here on my baseline, so I've got 1 hole, 2 hole that I'm gonna skip, and then I'm gonna just make my little double crochet in that 3rd stitch. And then I will do 5 of these. And each of these will use a different amount of string. I will just give everybody the amount of string for the design that uses the most string. And so shouldn't have to worry about running out of string, hopefully, unless you're doing your stitches really, really loose. So try to keep your stitches tight enough that you're not having major gaps. And you can see here, that's your 5 double crochets, and it gives then we'll skip 2 little stitches here. And so I might actually show you what it looks like if your stitches are too loose. So if your stitches get too loose, it will be just a little sloppier, a little less defined shapes. Sorry. The looser they are too, the harder it is to keep them on your hook. Like I just messed that stitch up and have to start over because I'm intentionally doing them super loose, but yeah. So we have here this really, really loose 5 double crochet scallop, or it's not a scallop, it's more of a seashell. So you can see here, that one is so much looser and larger than its counterpart next to it. And you can see when I turn it to the side, like there's these big loops that want to kind of hang out. Sorry, that's a little bit hard to see here, but those big loops that kind of just poke out a lot. And that I feel like puts you very prone to snags. And so, yeah, that's not really what you want your stitches to look like. And then alternatively, I'll show you an option of what it looks like when they're too tight. And the biggest thing you'll notice when it's too tight, for your border stitch at least, is you'll notice some puckering of the fabric. So the fabric will kind of start to like, oops, dropped my hook. The fabric will kind of start to like shrink together. And these stitches will be really tight, kind of pulling it too tightly. So you want, when you lay your fabric out, for it to look pretty nice and flat. It'll have a few like little wrinkles here and there, not a big deal, but like overall pretty flat. Roche is joining us. My hook. So I'm gonna do an example of, let's see, 1, 2. I'll do this same stitch, but with things way too tight. So you can see I'm not having a lot of like room for movement, and I'm keeping those loops very teeny tiny. So this kind of strains and stretches your yarn, but it also will pull on your fabric funny. And so it also makes for very teeny tiny designs. This is also a harder way to do it. It hurts your hands more because you're keeping so much tension in there. And so you can have a lot of variety, but the nicest way to do it is just making sure that things move freely without being overly relaxed or sloppy with them. So that's a very, very tight 5 stitch. And you can kind of see here's my typical 5 stitch. A very tight 5 stitch shell looks almost similar to a 3 stitch. And this will be exhausting to do, especially around the whole border. And so, yeah, this just is giving you some options of stitches, and then also kind of how your stitches should look versus not look. Hope this is helpful. Okay, so I've crocheted around all the edge, and now I am coming to the end of my row, and this is where I'm going to want to finish it off. So I'll show you how to finish it off. So here, this pattern, I've been skipping every other stitch. So now I kind of have 1, 2, and not really a 3rd stitch left, but this is where I'm going to have to decide where this will look best for my last stitch. Is my last stitch going to look best here or here? And I think it'll look best here, even though there's not a full stitch after it. So I'm just going to try that. See how it goes. This is a different stitch than what I've showed you guys, but yeah, so there, and then I'm gonna do my chain 1. So whatever your in between stitches action is, whether it's chaining 1 or whether it's coming down to this baseline and doing a slip stitch like you do for your scallops, you're gonna want to end on that. Basically, you don't want to put these 2 stitches right next to each other. You want a little chain in between them. So now to finish it off, I'm going to, sorry, I need to explain this better. So to finish it off, I'm going to, through this top loop of this first stitch on your row, you're going to poke through there, you're going to loop this, and you're going to do what's called a slip stitch. So just pulling this through the other stitch. You don't make a second loop, you just use that original loop to go all the way through there. And you'll notice that these 2 look a touch close to each other. Not a lot we can do about that. But there is still a little gap. That one just looks a touch thick. So this is how we're going to end it. And then we are going to trim this string here. So I'll set this down so that I can trim the string. And I'm going to leave a solid little tail. And then we are going to weave in this end here. So we're going to now just pull this through. And then I like to just kind of poke through in a little bit random places in these stitches to get it down to the baseline, to kind of blend it in. So here, and you're gonna go back to front and then front to back just to weave it in a little bit. And then here, this is where you do basically what you did with your stitch, with your initial long string here. So you can see that string that's kind of tucked and hidden there. We can do that exact same thing with this string. I often like to go the opposite direction. So I'll bring it this direction rather than the direction that the first one went, just because it takes away a little bit of the bulk. So here, if I just kind of, sorry, my dog's drinking water, and that's the most annoying thing for a video. So we're gonna just weave this here. You stick your crochet hook under the strings and loop and pull it through. And you're gonna do that all the way until, I like to tuck a solid, like probably 3 to 4 inches, just to make sure that it's not gonna come undone. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys have fun crocheting.